crafty friends, this is Jenny from crafttestdummies.com, and today we're going to have a little chat about ways to use alcohol inks and making backgrounds. Let's take a look. Okay, let's do some quick alcohol ink techniques. Now, if you don't have commercially available alcohol inks like Adirondacks or even the Pinata inks, that's okay because you have probably some alcohol-based markers. So I'm going to show you a few techniques using these Nuvo markers. And it's always nice to have like 2 or 3 different colors in a color scheme that you like. These are all kind of pinks and oranges. So first of all, I'm going to show you what we're going to do is, the other thing you do want to have handy is some rubbing alcohol. Now this is 70% rubbing alcohol. It costs about $1. As you can see, it's from CVS. And I like the stuff that is wintergreen. I think it smells a little bit better, and this can get a little stinky. And this would be something I would have in my medicine cabinet anyway. So I have put some of that into one of these little mini misters that I got for super cheap. And I'm also using a homemade block. Now this is just a rubber stamping block that I hot glued some hook and loop tape to the hooky side. And then I have cut some pieces of felt or batting, really thin quilting batting, and now I've made my own pouncing tool. Now if you have the Ink Essentials version from Tim Holtz, that's great, but you know, it doesn't have to be expensive stuff. So before I get ahead of myself, because you know I'm going to, let's just talk a minute about surfaces. And there are some really great surfaces for alcohol inks. And for this purpose of this video, we're only going to talk about card making. So we're not going to talk about like tiles and things like that. Let's just talk about our 3 main surfaces, which would be Yupo. And Yupo is not paper. It is plastic sheeting. It is impossible to rip. It can be heat embossed only with care. Ranger has its version of Yupo or polypropylene paper, but you can also go to your local art store and ask for Yupo or polypropylene paper by the sheet. I found it for $1.37 for a 12 by 36 inch sheet, which means it's much, much cheaper if you buy it big and then just cut it down to size. So also you'll notice that Yupo has kind of a matte sheen to it. The other thing that you can use is photo paper or glossy paper. Photo paper and glossy paper each act a little bit differently. Glossy allows the ink to move a little more freely. I didn't have that on hand today, but I did have photo paper, which of course is meant to absorb ink, so it doesn't blend quite as well on photo paper, but if you have it, you can use it. The other thing that you can use is some kind of acetate sheeting. This is Duralar. You can also use plastic pocket protectors. It's clear. There's a really good technique. I have a video. I'm going to link to it somewhere around here. So you can see how I use the clear sheets to work with alcohol ink. I'm not going to include it here because I've already done that. The only thing is, of course, once you do that, you are going to want to layer it. But that also gives you some really great opportunities too. If you make a fun background, it's a little bit harder to stamp on plastic, but you can always stamp on plain paper underneath and then just layer up your cards. And I'll show you an example of that at the end. So, all right, let's get going. The first thing we're going to do is just make a mottled background. And I'm going to start off by scribbling my alcohol marker on top of this Yupo paper. Now this is polypropylene. You can get it under the brand name Yupo. If you can't find this stuff, you can also use like clear acetate or plastic sheet protectors. That also works great. So, you know, it doesn't have to be Yupo. You can also use glossy paper. But I'm using Yupo just because it really does move and mix the best. So as you can see, I've just done a little scribble, and now I'm going to go ahead and kind of hit it with my alcohol ink. You can see that, or my rubbing alcohol, it makes things move and kind of makes them more vibrant. And now I'm just going to go ahead and kind of blend it in an ombre fashion with my little homemade pouncer here. And I'm just going to kind of move it around. And now I just have a little boop, 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 kind of an ombre watercolor background. that I can use for a card or a stamp. And if I decide it needs some more color, maybe I feel bad I lost the orange in here, add a little more and give it another spritz. The nice thing about alcohol inks is that it's not really done until you decide it's done, because it will always reactivate with more alcohol or whatever. Also, notice how it kind of makes these fun little cells, which are really popular right now. And it also turns it like a more vibrant pink. Ooh, I love it. Gorgeous. All right, so first background just by pouncing with a homemade block. Our next background is going to be using the same colors just because it's what I have on my table. And I'm gonna do kind of like a little random pattern here, adding some color down real fast. I'm not worried about messing up my tips. I can always clean them off by just working them on a piece of normal paper when all this is said and done. I'm gonna add these pretty colors, which kind of feel like summer to me anyway. And a little bit of yellow, just for funsies. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my alcohol and a little mini coffee stir, and I'm gonna give it a spritz. I'm gonna add a lot, and now I'm just gonna use the spritzer or the coffee stir to blow the air around. I can give it a little rotation. And I think that this is a really pretty way of getting your inks to flow around, and it's just by, you know, a little bit of wind power. Now, if you feel like there's too much on here, you can always take a secondary piece of paper. Again, this is Yupo paper, but you could use glossy paper, and just give it a little blot, and then you get 2 prints for the price of 1. And again, it's going to be, you know, kind of movie and flowy and watercolory, but that's one of the things that we like about alcohol inks. This next one I'm going to show you by using the commercially available alcohol inks, just because I really like the way this works. You can also use Copic marker reinkers if you have them, but this works a little bit better if you have more of a concentrated product. So what I'm going to do is just kind of make it move and flow a little bit with just the action that we get. I'm going to add a little bit of a third color, a little bit of something darker. And this time I'm going to use some Can Air. You could also, again, use your little straw, but this time I'm just going to move it around and chase it. It's also a little bit easier for me to show you, but you see, if you kind of chase it like this, you get those little fine capillaries, which I think are really interesting. And wherever I see a little puddle, that's where I'm adding the air to make it kind of spread out. And if it needs a little more, you can add a little more, because remember, it's not done until it's done. Now also, if it is still wet and you can see little shiny places, you can take a little bit of gold foil or Mylar backed foil if you have it. This is green because it's what I have on hand. And just give it a light burnish. And it'll actually pick up some of the foil in those wet places. And depending on how thick you are applying your alcohol, you may get some different effects. Here's another fun thing to do. If you have some mirror paper or foil paper, you can go ahead and add your alcohol inks, pounce them around, and then run them through an embossing folder. And you'll see how you can get such a really gorgeous texture and background there too. This one I started with a very heavy application of blending solution on Yupo paper. I was actually cleaning off something else that did not work out particularly well. I'm just going to add these little cells. By the way, if you like this look, you can leave the little cells as they are because they will chase the inks out of the way. And I think that that's kind of a fun thing to play with. So we're going to call this another technique that you can use. Just keep making fun concentric circles and watching things kind of let the one ink push the other ink out of the way. Now, if you get something that you like, but you want it to have some white dots, you can take a quilling tool or a Q-tip or even a toothpick and just add some blending solution, and it will also create some concentric circles for you. These are great for birthday cards because they kind of look like balloons. I said that you could use acetate or Duralar or plastic page protector. This is an example of what I did on a plastic page protector. And if you check in the description, I'll have a link to another video on a way of using this clear film with your alcohol inks. I just want to show you a few more examples. This is one that I kind of did that little air technique with a straw and also some pouncing on the background. Here's another version with slightly more diluted ink, meaning more alcohol, and also a little bit of a mixative. And here's another one that I did with some of that foil on top. So you'll see that there are just a lot of ways of using alcohol inks as backgrounds for tags or greeting cards. The thing is, just don't be afraid to play and see what kind of techniques you get. And if you don't like it, add a little bit of alcohol and just, start all over again. Now, I did promise you some card designs, so here we go and we'll walk you through them. As you can see in this one, I used one of those blotty backgrounds with a little bit of gold foil paper, an embossing folder with regular paper, and then a die cut. I really feel like die cuts are the way to go with these cards because it really adds that textural element that helps it stand out from these very busy, rich backgrounds. Here's the one where I used that straw to get that kind of coral effect. Once again, I did a little bit of stamping with a banner on top and then used another die cut. This is a double stack so that it really stood out. And I will tell you, I do love the On Point glue from Imagine Crafts. It sticks beautifully, and you can get a link to that in the description area. For this one, I caught myself trying to get fancy, and I tried the inlaid die cutting technique. It was fussy, and I don't think I would ever do that again, but you could, or you could just cut out the die and layer it on top, but it counts. And it might actually work a little bit better if you used a mirrored paper or an acetate for this technique instead. So for this one, I got a little fancy again, and what I did was I actually sliced out a middle of one of those bokeh effect backgrounds, substituted in one of the embossed pieces, and then I die cut the whole thing and then put it back on the background. I think it's really festive and it's really fun for a birthday card. I love those bokeh bubbles. And lastly, I'm going to show you where I used just some of that marbling technique. I used both the negative and the positive outside and inside the card to make a little thinking of you. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed all of these techniques and the card ideas. I know it was a long video. I'm hoping that you stuck with me. If you learned something, anything, give it a thumbs up. I'd love to have a comment from you. And as always, please subscribe and have a crafty day.